Hi, I'm Brian Crombie, and we're going to be talking on The Brian Crombie Show. We're going to be talking about politics, arts, business, and social issues on The Brian Crombie Show on Canada One TV. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Show on Canada One TV. So, one of the big issues lots of us have right now is real estate. Should we buy? Should we sell? Should we refinance? And interest rates are a big issue. And so I wanted to introduce you tonight to Natasha Sokolovski, who is a mortgage broker. And I've interviewed her before. She's very, very bright. She's just newly launched into the mortgage broking business, but she brings a real fresh outlook to this business. And I think it's something that we have to really understand right now if we're owning homes and we're thinking about what we should be doing with our existing homes and, more importantly, with our existing mortgages. So, Natasha, how are you? Welcome to the show.
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. So interest rates are probably going up.
I certainly hope so. I think we can all agree that we've entered into an inflationary environment, right? And the typical tool that the governments use to combat inflation is to increase interest rates. And the government hasn't done it as of yet because they're worried about impacting economic growth, the unemployment challenges. But we're now at a point where interest rates have hit rock bottom.
And have been here for a while.
And they've been here for a while.
And probably justifiably so because of COVID-19 and the pandemic response and making sure that the economy wasn't in the tank. But in the last couple of days, they announced the jobs report. And we've actually recovered more jobs than we had before the pandemic in 2019, 2020. And so, the economy is doing well. And inflation is up. So you think the government's going to increase interest rates. And so if the government increases interest rates, what's the impact on, first of all, the housing market, and number two, what people should do with their mortgages?
Well, I think that's a loaded question.
That's why I asked you.
So interest rates, they're going to go up. But the issue at hand is that we're so heavily invested in real estate in Canada that they cannot possibly go up to the point that we need it to be to impact inflation, and I would argue even the housing prices, to make housing become more affordable. So what we're going to see is, yes.
So you don't think housing prices are going to go down?
Not with the way that interest rates are going to go up. I think they're going to go up very gradually. Okay. The regulators, I would say, probably don't want to shock the system. Right now, with real estate, we're at 10% of GDP. Real estate is the driving contributor to GDP.
10% of GDP from a construction standpoint?
Residential, just residential housing. And so with that, it's surpassing manufacturing, right? And so having so much investment, high mortgage debt, I think mortgage debt right now in Canada is at 2.2 trillion. You're having households and governments with the
huge amounts of debt.
Huge amounts. It's going to become a huge burden. And then you're thinking, when it comes to the economy, like, how are we going to recover and be able to afford all these interest payments? So I think there's a lot at play with what's going on in Canada. And so, yes, interest rates are going to go up. Do I think they're going to go up 5 times next year? No, I don't. So if they start to go up gradually, say maybe like 2 times by 25 basis points, that's not going to really impact the housing affordability. That's still relatively cheap interest rates. What I think has to happen is that the actual environment needs to change. And I think what's going to be interesting is, what are lenders going to do? What are the regulators going to do? Are they going to start tightening up their measures where it becomes more difficult to buy second, third, and fourth properties? I'm sure you've read too that the Bank of Canada is blaming housing prices going up due to investors. And so when you look at the graphs, you start to see there's a shift right now in Canada where before we would purchase homes as a consumption good. We would buy it to live there. Now what you're seeing is that it's becoming more of an asset class. investors are starting to purchase more of the properties right now. You're starting to see a shift, and that's what's really skyrocketing the prices, is that we've created a lucrative environment for people to take on debt.
Is there something wrong with that?
I don't think there's anything wrong with that, you know? It's almost
Because if they buy them as a second place, one would think they'd rent them out. And they rent them out, then you're still having housing supplied to the marketplace. It's just there as rental housing rather than as houses or condos to own.
Exactly. Which then makes it so much more challenging for those who are looking to purchase a property, right? For becoming a first-time home buyer. That goal of owning a home is becoming
More
harder,
challenging, no question, and that's an issue.
Yeah, exactly. So no, I don't think it's bad. It kind of reminds me of what happened on social media, where parents would put candy in front of a child and say, don't eat it when I leave the room. And then of course the child's just sitting there like, do I eat it or not? And they end up eating it. I just think, what do you expect? You're creating an environment where banks are basically giving money away for free.
So you think money is like candy right now?
Well, I'm going to compare the two. I'm going to compare the two and say that. But I do think we've created an environment where you have all this ability to take on so much debt right before us. So of course we're just going to sit there and devour it. And you see it with the mortgage trends right now. Right now, a lot of non-bank lenders are lending out to residential mortgages. That's growing. You have uninsured mortgages growing right now. Back in, I believe, like 2016, 2017, insured mortgages were about 46%. Now they're about 26%.
Really?
So banks are more at risk, you know, with insured mortgages. Banks, they weren't at risk. They didn't care. They weren't taking the hit. The insurers were. But now we have more conventional mortgages being taken out. And then we have to talk about home equity lines of credit, HELOCs. Yeah. HELOCs right now, the outstanding balance was at $270 billion in September. So you're seeing mortgage trends where people are taking on a lot of debt.
Okay, so debt, housing debt has increased dramatically.
Yes.
And uninsured housing debt's increased, and debt that has come from the non-bank lenders, from home equity lines of credit, et cetera, have increased. Isn't this comparable to what happened in the United States in the mid 2000s? You know, before the 2007-8 housing crisis in the United States, housing was at huge rates, huge levels, caused by subprime lending, and that was the blame in the United States. And because we didn't have it in Canada, people said that we didn't suffer the same kind of challenge. And if you take a look, and you've probably looked at it, the graphs of houses to incomes and houses to rents in Canada versus the United States, we are at the level right now that the United States was in 2008, just before the Bear Stearns, Lehman Brothers, Goldman Sachs, et cetera, crisis, and the housing decline, the subprime mortgage decline, et cetera. So doesn't that say that there's a bubble that's potentially waiting to burst?
It's a good question. Do I think we're in a bubble? Yes, I do. And I do think we're in a bubble.
A housing bubble.
We're in a housing bubble. And my definition of a housing bubble would be prices rising drastically due to demand and exuberant spending. And I think when you can look to see what's going on with how people are purchasing properties right now, I think we can agree there's some exuberant spending going on, right? So is it going to burst? I don't think what happened in the US is going to happen in Canada.
Why?
Well, for starters, to qualify for a mortgage, right, you need to qualify at 5.25%. So we do have that benchmark.
So the regulators came in and increased the stress test.
They increased the stress test.
Which you think is going to provide us some cushion?
I think it will provide us some cushion. I do think, but then when it comes down to interest rates going up, they're not going to be going up drastically. And so I think the important messaging right now for those that are listening is that, we're going to be entering some challenging times. Interest rates will go up. People need to start to take advantage of their situation right now and really look at where they're spending, start saving, figure out what their goals are, and create a budget. I think people...
And do what? And pay down their mortgage?
Well,
Should they go long-term? What? Do it with
wouldn't
that
say-
savings, with that budget, with that savings? What do they do with it?
I would say they need to put that money aside so that when interest rates start to increase, they're not impacting their monthly cash flow. So I'm not suggesting that they take that money and apply it to their mortgage. I'm just saying that.
Why not?
Why not?
Why not?
Well, it's just going to make it more challenging for them to live day by day. You think people should take money and put it towards their mortgage and pay it down
I
quickly?
think if you've got a risk of a housing decline and interest rates that are going to potentially go up, the typical response would be either fix and lock in good long-term rates.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that. And I know that you don't agree with that. You think variable interest rates
Yeah.
are the right way to go. But that would be a typical response.
Yeah.
And then the second one would be pay down debt.
Yeah.
Pay down your mortgage, pay down your principal, and lower your leverage. Because if property values go down, then if you lower your mortgage ahead of time, you're creating some risk insurance. And that would be the appropriate thing. I do think that one of the, and you and I have talked about this before, one of my favorite books, James Clavell Taipan, wrote about needing to have buzz-off money. He used a more flavorful word for what you wanted, but I think that attitude of having a little bit of savings so that if you lose your job or you end up having an accident and you can't go to work, or you want to quit because you hate your boss or whatever it is, having a little bit of buzz-off money in cash or readily available cash is helpful, there's no question. But lowering your debt level, lowering your leverage, is not a bad strategy, particularly if you think that housing prices might go down and interest rates might go up.
But here's the thing, I don't think housing prices are going to go down anytime soon. I really don't. And I think a lot of people I find ask me, well, what do you think is going to happen next year? Do you think housing prices are going to continue to go up? Because it seems like everyone is building about 20 to 30% equity year over year. Do I think that's going to happen next year? For like the hot zone areas, no, I don't. And that would probably be Toronto and Vancouver. So I think they're going to kind of remain the same. I don't think you're going to start to see much appreciation. So I don't think we're going to see housing kind of revert back and completely correct itself, because the interest rates, in my belief, are not going to go up enough to cause that correction. I would be really surprised if that was to happen.
Okay. Well, it's interesting. So I've got a slightly different point of view.
Yeah.
And let's have a discussion about it. So I happen to think that supply is at an almost all-time low.
Okay.
And you talk to the different real estate brokers and agents, and you see the statistics. What they say is demand is reasonably high, but supply is low.
Yeah.
And so you got to ask yourself, why is supply low? If housing prices are great, why wouldn't people be wanting to sell? Be wanting to sell because, as you say, they're thinking, hey, I made 20% this year, maybe 20% last year. Why not hang around and make another 20% next year? But they could sell, buy something else, and still make that 20%. So I think that's a questionable reason why. I think a little bit of it is COVID-19. People don't want to be out looking at houses right now. They don't want to be packing up their own house. They don't want to be worrying about all the hassle of moving during a questionable time period. And so I think that supply is low. When supply is low and demand is high, basic supply demand says pricing is going to go up. And at the same time, when it's low cost, they go up even more. In addition, we've got high immigration. So there's going to be 450,000 immigrants coming to Canada next year, 150,000 to the Greater Toronto Area alone. And so you got a whole bunch of people coming to Toronto from around the world and from outside of the Greater Toronto Area. And so I think that that's an issue. And I think there's also, the hamster wheel effect, where people take a look at it going up and they say, I got to get on this game.
Oh, fear of
otherwise
missing out.
I'm gonna have to pay 20% more a year from now. And so I think with all those factors, what you've got is a lot of demand and limited supply. I also think what ended up happening is construction slowed down because of COVID.
Yeah.
I think that the city municipal governments slowed down their approvals because of COVID. And so therefore you've had less condos come on the market, new developments come on the market, et cetera. So I think this has been an unusual time period. You take a look at Florida, it's up 25%, Texas is up 25%, New York is up. So, you've got a lot of different areas in North America, particularly in those major metropolitan areas that have gone up. And what goes up must come down.
No, completely. I agree. And I think what will be interesting is you're starting to see the big banks putting pressure on the Bank of Canada, wanting them to increase interest rates because they're looking at the reality of things. And they probably are looking at their balance sheets and realizing, whoa, we're kind of over leveraged here themselves. So I think when it comes to the first increase, it would be interesting to see how many people
Back off.
will probably want to sell. Oh, I better sell before interest rates go up because then housing prices are going to go down and I'm not going to make as much money. Or you're also going to have the alternative of people wanting to buy even more to beat the rate hike. So I think that will be interesting to see how that unfolds because I know the big banks would like to see interest rates go up before March.
Yep.
So will that happen? I don't know. They have one more meeting this year, and so I think we'll hear very shortly
What's going to happen?
what their plan is.
We're chatting tonight with Natasha Sokolovski. Sokolovski, I apologize, a mortgage broker, Sokolovski, a mortgage broker, about interest rates, mortgages, and housing prices, and the real estate market, which all of us have exposure to. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back more with Natasha in just a minute. Stay with us, everybody.
अगर खुशियां गिनने का मीटर होता तो साफ दिख जाता सऊदी अरब वाले असगर भाई की इतनी, दुबई में सलमान और शाहिदा बाजी की इतनी, बर्तानिया से राशिद चचा और अमेरिका वाले आसिम साहब की ना सिर्फ इतनी खुशियां बढ़ चुकी हैं बल्कि बढ़ती ही जा रही हैं। इन सब के साथ साथ दीगर पाकिस्तानी भी ढेरों खुशियां समेट रहे हैं सोनी धरती रेमिटेंस प्रोग्राम के शानदार रिवॉर्ड पॉइंट्स के साथ। तो बैंक्स और एक्सचेंज कंपनी से रकम भेजते रहिए और हासिल करते रहें रिवॉर्ड पॉइंट्स के बदले फ्री सर्विसेज, इंटरनेशनल एयर टिकट्स, टैक्स और ड्यूटी पेमेंट्स, शिनाख्ती दस्तावेजात की रिन्यूअल, इंश्योरेंस पेमेंट्स, यूटिलिटी स्टोर से खरीदारी और बहुत सारी सहूलियात। आज ही सोनी धरती ऐप डाउनलोड कीजिए और रजिस्टर हो जाइए, क्योंकि आपके दम से ही है पाकिस्तान की तरक्की और खुशहाली। सोनी धरती रेमिटेंस प्रोग्राम, हमेशा अपनों के करीब। हुकूमत पाकिस्तान, स्टेट बैंक ऑफ पाकिस्तान और मालियाती इदारों की जानिब से एक अहम कदम।
Hi, I'm Brian Crombie, and we're going to be talking on The Brian Crombie Show. We're going to be talking about politics, arts, business, and social issues on The Brian Crombie Show on Canada One TV. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Show on Canada One TV. It's a real pleasure of mine to introduce you and chat tonight with Natasha Sokolovski, who is a mortgage broker and someone who has all the figures at your ready. So it's impressive, your capability with all those numbers. Natasha, let's talk a little bit about fixed versus floating, variable interest rates versus long-term mortgage interest rates. And we have chatted about this before. It's interesting, the last couple of weeks, first of all, interest rates went up in the marketplace generally. And then because of this new variant out of South Africa, people were worried about what was going to happen in the economy, and interest rates backed off. And I've heard that a lot of people took that opportunity to think about fixing because they saw the interest rates go up and they probably, maybe agreed with you, oh no, I'm going to take advantage of variable interest rates. But then when the market backed off and interest rates came down a little bit because of the variant, and concerns about economic slowdowns, a lot of people have been fixing lately. What does that mean? Do you think that you should fix your mortgage interest rate or stay variable? And explain the difference between variable and fixed if you could.
Yeah, not a problem. So a fixed rate, if I was to explain it, is a rate that is going to be that amount for the entire term of your mortgage. So if you lock in at a fixed rate at 2.79%, well, for the next 5 years, that's what you're going to be paying. With variable rates, they fluctuate. So you could enter into a mortgage term at a variable rate, and like right now, some of them are hovering around 1.15%. I've seen as low as 0.90%, so we're still really low right now. So that rate will stay the same for only a short period of time. It's very dependent on if there's a rate increase, then it will go up. So it fluctuates. So essentially just know a variable is going to go up and it's going to move with the Bank of Canada increasing the rate. I hope I explained that well.
Okay, and
Not
so
sure.
why would someone want to fix versus someone that would want to stay variable and floating?
It just makes money management easy because you know how much your mortgage is going to be monthly, bi-weekly. So when it comes to financial planning, it just makes life easier. So I would say that's why people stay with fixed.
Okay, and what do you advise?
I know you probably don't agree with me, but I would advise, but I just want to caution people, it's really dependent on your risk profile. If you are inclined to risk and you're the type of person that you're okay with planning ahead, then I do think variable mortgage rates would be for you. So I would recommend those because you're getting an interest rate at the lowest possible that you can get it, which just basically means more of your money is going to be allocated towards your principal versus the interest. So I'm a firm believer in, having that type of product and taking advantage of the low interest rate. And once interest rates start to go up, you could offset that as long as you plan ahead. So I know I talked about saving and putting that money aside. Take advantage of these low interest rates, but you can basically pretend that you're paying the higher fix and keep putting that money aside into another savings account. And then this way, when interest rates start to go up, you're not going to be in a position where you're thinking, oh shoot, my monthly cash flow is really impacted. You can just draw from that bank account to offset it. And the magical thing about this strategy is that we don't know how many times interest rates are going to go up. Bank of Canada may only increase them once next year. Maybe they won't even do it at all. So that means you're putting more money towards your principal residence and then in the hands of the bank, which I think is a good strategy. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, and lots of people follow your strategy.
Yeah.
There's no question. And so therefore it's a strategy that a lot of people believe in. So I disagree. And let me, but this
Fair
is
enough,
good. This
fair
is
enough.
good. This is why I wanted to have you on the show. And the reason why is over time, floating interest rates have equaled and averaged the long-term interest rate. Mm-hmm. The long-term interest rate, the fixed interest rate, is the market's bet as to what the average floating rate interest rate is going to be. So if you're, to use your example, let's say the floating interest rate is 1% and the long-term rate is 2%, the market is saying that interest rates will be 1%, 2%, and 3% over time, such that the 2% average is the right amount. And you're right that what you're doing is you're paying insurance, such that you're paying an increment over that floating rate 1% up to the 2%, to mean in the future you don't end up paying the 3 and 4%, you come back down to the 2%.
Yeah.
And people in when I graduated from university, which was a few years before you were born probably, interest rates went up to 18%, floating interest rates. And let me tell you, people that were floating were devastated. Now, I'm not suggesting interest rates are going to go up like that again, but if you can lock in 10-year money at low interest rates, I think that makes a ton of sense. Now, that said, I do like your strategy about putting money aside. And so one of the strategies that I've recommended a lot of people follow is not to put the money into a savings account, but to pay down their debt. And so therefore, if you've got a home equity line of credit or you've got a floating rate interest rate and you've got the right to prepay your mortgage, and your interest rate is 1%, pay the full 2%, but in a floating rate, and use that increment 1% to pay down your principal. Because if your debt goes down more quickly over time, then it makes a lot of sense. And I think the big difference is a lot of people think that debt is good. And I think that debt in a company where you can get a tax deduction for it, or on an investment property or an investment business, buying stocks or other things, is good because you can deduct the interest against the income for tax purposes. But in a principal residence in Canada, you can't do that. In the United States, mortgage interest is deductible, but in Canada, mortgage interest is not deductible, and so therefore, if you don't get a deduction against your taxes for mortgage interest, it's your money, and 100% your money, and you're paying it to the government, and not paying the government, you're paying it to the bank, and you're paying it full price. And so I think it makes a lot of sense. Now, if you've got a second property that's an investment property, or you've got an investment portfolio that's earning income, raising money, debt against that, and keeping the debt against that over time, and paying down your principal mortgage, now that makes a ton of sense. But I think that, number one, most economists think the economy is going to, other than maybe because of variants of COVID-19 and potential slowdowns and lockdowns and things like that, most people think that the economy is going to do well next year. And if you take a look at the statistics, we went through this, not even a V-shaped recovery, we went through a hockey stick recovery. The market actually came back, very powerfully. Employment is higher today than it was, as I said, in 2019, just before COVID-19 hit. Inflation is up. Supply chains are disrupted, which means that inflation is up normally as well as because of supply chains. And I think that this whole move to a green economy is going to mean that you've got people buying electrical cars. They're going to be doing other things to lower their carbon footprint. Carbon taxes are going to come up. So all that's going to mean that you've got inflation, economic growth. Selling your old clunker and buying a new electrical vehicle, etc. All that says to me, growth's up, inflation's up, interest rates are going to have to come up, and now might be a good time to lock in. Your turn.
I still think, I would still ride out the variable wave. But the good thing is...
Ride out the variable wave. It's a good way to describe it, ride the wave.
I would ride the wave and see what happens because, just to play devil's advocate, what if this new COVID variant takes a toll and we enter into another lockdown? And then, our beautiful unemployment rate that you spoke about, that's at 6%. What if it goes up again? And then all of a sudden we have to enter into another government assistance spending program.
And if that happens, I would argue that's the time for sure to fix, just as a lot of people fixed in the last couple of weeks as this Omicron came on.
But that would also mean that it's going to take us even longer to rebound, where I would be very doubtful that the Bank of Canada would increase interest rates then. So I think right now, the best thing that everyone just needs to do is stay informed, read the news, know what's going on in the world, because it's changing constantly. And I'm sure you and I talking right now, when the Bank of Canada meets I think they meet tomorrow, things are going to change. We've got to see what's going to happen with the COVID variant. A lot of moving factors are happening right now, which I find fascinating because we can both sit here and speculate about what could potentially happen, but neither of us know for sure what is going to happen. So number one, people need to stay informed and really educate themselves just so that they can make the right decisions for them. And I think at the end of the day, when it comes to mortgages, it's really your risk tolerance, what you're willing to handle. If, worrying about watching the market and knowing what's going on with interest rates is too stressful, then by all means, I completely agree with you. Take a fixed product. At the end of the day, you don't want to be stressed about your mortgage. There's enough going on in the world to be stressed about. So it's really dependent on what people need for their own personal goals. But yes, I still would choose variable.
Okay, so this has been a great conversation. You're a mortgage broker. Tell us why should someone go to a mortgage broker rather than just go to their bank to get a mortgage?
Well, that's a very easy question.
That's why I loved it too.
Well, for starters, people should utilize a mortgage broker, specifically me, just because we work in the client's best interest. I'm not tied to any bank. So really, I work for the best interest of the client. I take the heavy lifting out of their mortgage journey. And so that's why clients should utilize mortgage brokers. And it's a great way to stay informed as to what's going on in this world so that they make good decisions.
And how does a mortgage broker get paid? Does it cost me more money if I come to you?
No. Well, that's very dependent on who we utilize to finalize your deal. So a typical A lender, you're not having to pay anything to utilize a mortgage broker. But if you were to go to some B lenders or a private lender, the typical percentage straight across the board is about 1%.
So it's going to cost me 1% more potentially with a non-bank lender to use a mortgage broker.
Yeah.
So that the A lenders, the major banks pay your fee, and the other lenders don't pay your fee?
Correct.
Why? That doesn't make sense.
That's a great question. I'm not sure why that is. I don't know why they download it onto the client. I'm not
If
sure.
people want to follow you so they can stay informed and or reach out to you to potentially use your services and check you out, how do they do that?
So they can follow me on Instagram, Mortgages by Tash. They can
Mortgages by Tash.
Mortgages by Tash. I go by Tash. I feel like it's more personable to use my nickname. So Mortgages by Tash on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter as well.
Okay, and you're with
Dominion Lending.
Dominion Lending, which is one of the biggest mortgage broking outfits out there. And one of my favorite economists is your chief economist, Sherry Cooper.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
We're going to have to, we should make a bet on how much interest rates are going to go up between now and this time next year.
And which one outperforms which, sorry, let me rephrase that. Which, does a variable outperform a fix, or does a fix outperform a variable next year? We'll have to place a bet on that.
Okay, I'm saying fixed.
Obviously, I'm saying variable.
Okay, we'll meet again next year and see who wins the bet. And what are we betting on?
I don't know. We'll have to think
Your
about
fee on a
that.
mortgage. Deal?
Deal.
Okay, sounds good. How do I pronounce your last name?
Sokolovski.
Natasha Sokolovski, Mortgages by Tash, mortgage broker with Dominion Lending. Fantastic conversation, debate about fixed versus variable, whether interest rates are going to go up or not, and whether the housing market is overpriced and a bubble. And I think we both agree it may be overpriced, but I'm thinking it's a bubble that may, if not burst, simmer down a lot. And I think Natasha's saying it's going to keep on chugging, maybe not at 20% a year. Is that fair?
No, I'm not saying that. It's going to slowly ooze out.
Slowly use out. Okay,
Yeah.
so both of us think there's going to be
Yeah.
some air left out of the bubble. Thanks for joining us, Brian Crombie on the Canada One TV. Good night, everybody.